The noon sun beat down on Dry Willow's main street, turning the white dust into a shimmering haze that made the distant mesas dance like mirages. Elias Boone squinted against the glare as he led his daughter June down the rutted wagon road, their boots raising small clouds with each step. The leather of his worn saddle creaked where it hung over his shoulder, waiting for old Sam at the tack shop to mend the broken stirrup. "Daddy, my throat's dry as sand," June said, tugging at his calloused hand. At 9 years old, she had her mother's delicate features but her father's steady gaze, though hers still held the innocence he'd long since lost. "We'll stop at the Copper Star for some water, little bird," Elias replied, adjusting his hat to shade her face. The saloon wasn't his first choice for bringing June, but the public well sat 3 blocks past, and the child had been helping him mend fences since dawn. The Copper Star's bat-wing doors hung crooked on their hinges, one side permanently stuck open from a brawl the previous winter. Inside, the dimness offered blessed relief from the sun. Elias paused at the threshold, letting his eyes adjust while June peered around his hip. The usual crowd hunched over their drinks, cowboys killing time between drives, miners spending their dust, and a few merchants escaping their shop's afternoon heat. At the bar, Elias recognized Tom Harper, who ran the general store, nursing what looked like his 3rd whiskey despite the early hour. "Wait here," Elias told June, pointing to a bench near the door. But as he stepped toward the bar to ask for water, a woman's voice cut through the saloon's lazy mumble. "I said no. Please let go of my arm." The voice was cultured, Eastern educated, and trying hard to stay calm. Elias turned to see 2 men he knew by reputation, Hank Cutter and Roy Bell, ranch hands from the Cutter spread flanking a young woman in a travel-worn blue dress. She clutched a leather satchel against her chest, while Hank's meaty hand wrapped around her upper arm. "Come on now, songbird," Hank slurred, whiskey thick on his breath even from across the room. "Roy here wants to hear that pretty voice of yours. Sing us something sweet." The woman, she couldn't be more than 25, tried to pull away. "I'm not a saloon singer. I'm here on business for the Territorial Survey. Now please." Roy Bell laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "Survey business? What's a pretty thing like you doing counting rocks and streams?" His hand moved toward her satchel. "What you got in there, love letters?" "Documentation that's none of your concern," she said firmly. But Elias caught the tremor beneath her brave words. The bartender, Miguel, polished a glass with practiced indifference. Tom Harper studied his whiskey. Nobody moved. It was the code of the frontier, don't invite trouble that ain't yours. Elias felt June's small hand slip into his. She disobeyed and followed him. Her brown eyes, so like her mother's, looked up at him with that expression he knew too well. "Daddy," she whispered, "can we help her?" The words hit him like cold water. Sarah would have asked the same thing, would have expected him to act. He could almost hear his late wife's voice. "Strength ain't worth much if you don't use it to protect those who can't protect themselves." Elias squeezed June's hand, then gently moved her behind a water barrel. "Stay put this time. I mean it." He approached slowly, hands visible, projecting the calm he'd learned breaking horses. "Afternoon, boys. Mighty hot for this kind of foolishness." Hank's bloodshot eyes swung toward him. "None of your business. Boone, go back to your dirt farming." "Can't rightly do that," Elias said conversationally. "See, my daughter's watching, and I'd prefer she didn't see a lady mishandled. How about you boys let Miss Hart," the woman supplied, "Clara Hart. How about you let Miss Hart go about her business, and I'll buy the next round." Roy's hand drifted toward the knife at his belt. "Or maybe we teach you to mind your own." The thing about violence was timing. Elias had learned that breaking mustangs and, before June was born, in places he didn't talk about. As Roy's fingers touched the knife handle, Elias moved. His left hand caught Roy's wrist, twisting it away from the blade. His right swept Hank's grip from Clara's arm. Both movements flowed like water. No wasted motion. No unnecessary force. Yet. Now, Elias said, still conversational. Miss Hart's gonna walk out that door, you boys are gonna finish your drinks, and we're all gonna have a peaceful afternoon. Hank's face flushed purple. You dare lay hands on me! Do you know who my brother is? Everyone knew. Vernon Cutter owned the largest ranch in 3 counties, controlled most of the water rights, and had the sheriff in his vest pocket. I know who you are, Elias said. Question is, do you know who you are? The kind of men who rough up women in saloons, is that what you want to be? For a moment, the saloon held its breath. Then Roy jerked free and grabbed for his knife. The blade cleared leather, bright in the lamplight. Elias didn't want to draw, not with June watching, but some men only understood one language. His Colt appeared in his hand like magic, the motion practiced 10,000 times. He fired once, the bullet striking the floorboard between Roy's feet, sending splinters into his boots. Next one goes in your hand, Elias said quietly, the one holding that knife. Roy dropped the blade. It clattered on the floor like bones. Clara Hart hadn't screamed, hadn't fainted. She stood straight-backed, clutching her satchel, watching with intelligent hazel eyes. Thank you, Mr. Boone, she said with remarkable composure. I'll take my leave now. She walked to the door with measured steps, paused to smile at June, who was peeking around the water barrel despite orders, and disappeared into the blazing afternoon. Elias backed toward the door, gun still out but pointed down. Miguel, these boys' drinks are on me, assuming they're smart enough to sit quiet and finish them. Hank's hand had found his own gun butt, but he hadn't drawn. This ain't over. Boone, you just made the biggest mistake of your worthless life. Maybe, Elias allowed, but it's my mistake to make. Outside, he found June waiting by the hitching post, holding Clara Hart's hand. The woman knelt at his daughter's eye level, speaking softly. Your father's a brave man. Clara was saying, he promised Mama he'd teach me to choose being good over being strong. June replied solemnly, but I think he did both today. Clara's eyes misted. She stood as Elias approached. Mr. Boone, I don't know how to thank you. Those men were drunk and stupid. Elias finished. You might want to conclude your business quick and catch the next stage out. The Cutter boys hold grudges. I can't leave yet. My survey of the water table isn't complete. The Territorial Commission needs my report for the proposed irrigation project. Elias studied her face, determined chin, ink-stained fingers, wisps of auburn hair escaping from her practical bun, an educated woman alone in rough country, doing work that threatened powerful interests. Sarah would have liked her. Then you'd best be careful, he said. Where are you staying? Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. Good. She runs a decent place? He touched his hat brim. Come on, June, we still need to see about that stirrup? They'd made it half a block when running footsteps sounded behind them. Elias spun, hand dropping to his gun. But it was only Miguel's boy, Pablo. Senor Boone, my father says to tell you, the sheriff's coming. Hank sent someone to fetch him. You should go. Sheriff Kincaid, Vernon Cutter's bought man, wearing a badge that meant less than the tin it was stamped from. Thanks, Pablo. Elias flipped the boy a penny. Tell your PA I appreciate the warning. But he didn't run. Running would teach June the wrong lesson. Instead, they walked to old Sam's shop, collected the mended saddle, and headed for their small ranch outside town. Let Kincaid come. Let them all come. A man had to stand for something, or he'd fall for anything. As they passed the last buildings of Dry Willow, June looked up at him. Daddy, what's irrigation mean? It means bringing water where it's needed. Little bird, making dry land green. Is that why those men were mad at Miss Clara because of water? Elias looked out at the vast brown landscape, at the cottonwoods marking the precious creek lines, at the distant mountains where snow melt fed the rivers that men would fight and die to control. Could be, he said. Water's life out here, and some folks think they own life itself. June considered this seriously, then nodded. Well, I'm glad we helped her. Mama would be glad too. Yeah, Elias said softly, feeling the weight of what he'd started. She would. The sun continued its relentless path across the cloudless sky. By tomorrow, word would spread through Dry Willow like wildfire. The nobody cowboy who'd stood up to the Cutter boys, who'd pulled a gun in the Copper Star, who'd chosen a stranger's safety over his own peace. Elias shifted the saddle on his shoulder and took his daughter's hand. Whatever came next, he'd face it the same way he faced everything since Sarah died, one day at a time, teaching June through example that doing right mattered more than doing easy. Behind them, Dry Willow shimmered in the heat, as full of promise and threat as the desert itself. The next morning dawned cool and clear, with a breeze that wouldn't last past breakfast. Elias was already mending the chicken coop when June came running from the house, her bare feet kicking up dust. Daddy Ryder's coming. Elias straightened, scanning the horizon. 3 men on horseback approached from town, but their easy pace suggested conversation, not confrontation. He recognized Doc Finch's gray mare and relaxed slightly. Go inside and get dressed proper. He told June, we've got visitors. The riders were Mayor Pike, Doc Rosalind Finch, and Tom Harper from the general store. They reined up at the fence, and Pike removed his hat, mopping his forehead though the day wasn't yet hot. Morning, Elias, the mayor said. His tone carried the weight of a man with unpleasant business. Mayor, Doc, Tom. Elias nodded to each. Coffee's on if you'd care to come in. This won't take long, Pike said, dismounting with a grunt. The others followed suit. Word's all over town about yesterday's incident. Incident? Elias leaned against the fence post. That what we're calling it when men hassle women now. Doc Finch spoke up, her voice crisp as her starched collar. Nobody's defending the Cutter boys, Elias, but you pulled a gun in a public establishment. After Roy pulled a knife. Be that as it may, Pike interrupted. Vernon Cutter's breathing fire says you assaulted his brother, disturbed the peace. He wants you arrested. Tom Harper, who'd witnessed everything, stayed conspicuously silent, studying his boots. And, Elias prompted, and Sheriff Kincaid's inclined to oblige him. I talked him into waiting until tempers cool, but... Pike spread his hands helplessly. But nothing, Doc Finch said sharply. Josiah Pike, you know as well as I do what really happened. Tom was there. He saw it all. Tom shifted uncomfortably. I was pretty deep in my cups. Doc can't rightly say I recall the details. Convenient, she said, ice in her tone. June appeared on the porch, properly dressed now, watching the adults with worried eyes. Elias gave her a reassuring nod before turning back to his visitors. I appreciate the warning, Mayor, but I did what needed doing, and I'd do it again. That's what I'm afraid of, Pike muttered. He was a weak man trying to balance between conscience and commerce, and it showed in every line of his face. That woman, Clara Hart, she's stirring up a hornet's nest with her survey work. The Irrigation Commission's proposition has folks divided. What proposition? Elias asked. Doc Finch answered. A series of small dams and channels to distribute water more fairly among the smaller farms. The territorial government would oversee it, not the big ranchers, which would break Vernon Cutter's stranglehold on the water supply. Elias concluded. Exactly. And now you've made yourself a target by defending the very person threatening his empire. After the visitors left, Elias and June went to town for supplies. The usual 20-minute ride felt longer with June's worried silence. As they tied up outside Harper's store, whispers followed them like tumbleweeds. Elias Boone, a familiar voice called. Clara Hart emerged from Mrs. Holloway's boarding house across the street. She wore a practical brown skirt and carried her ever-present satchel. I was hoping to see you. Miss Hart. He touched his hat. "You're still in town. My work isn't finished." She smiled at June. "Hello again, young lady. I never properly introduced myself yesterday. I'm Clara." June, usually shy with strangers, smiled back. "I'm June, like the month." "A lovely name." Clara's expression grew serious as she turned back to Elias. "I heard about the trouble I've caused you. I'm deeply sorry." "You didn't cause anything. Some men make their own trouble and blame it on whoever's handy." She studied him with those intelligent hazel eyes. "Still, I feel responsible. Perhaps I could speak to Mayor Pike. Explain that you were only—" "No need. Pike knows the truth. He just lacks the backbone to act on it." Clara's lips tightened. "I've noticed that's a common ailment around here. Mr. Boone, might I ask you something? You know this land. In your opinion, would small-scale irrigation help the local farmers?" Elias considered. "Depends on the execution. Water's everything out here, right now. If you're not friends with Vernon Cutter, you pray for rain or go bust. Fair distribution could change that. That's what my preliminary data suggests." She opened her satchel, revealing notebooks crammed with figures and sketches. "But I need to survey more sites, especially near Coyote Springs and Miller's Wash. The problem is those sites are on or near Cutter land." Elias finished. "Precisely after yesterday, I doubt I'd receive a warm welcome." June tugged on Elias's sleeve. "Daddy, look!" Strange boot prints marked the dust near their horses, larger than average, with a distinctive worn heel. Elias had seen that print before, around his property line. "June, go into Harper's and get our supplies. Here's the list." He handed her the paper and some coins, waiting until she was inside before kneeling to examine the prints closer. Clara watched curiously. "What is it?" "Someone's been watching my place. Same boots." He stood, scanning the street. "Miss Hart, you'd best be careful. This kind of interest usually means—" A scream cut through the morning air. "Mrs." Holloway burst from her boarding house. "Fire! Someone help fire!" Smoke billowed from an upstairs window. Clara's room, Elias realized. He ran across the street, Clara close behind. The boarding house parlor was already filling with smoke. "Where's your other guests?" Elias shouted to Mrs. Holloway. "Out. They're all out but my house." "Get water buckets," Elias ordered the gathering crowd, then charged up the stairs. The smoke was thicker here, acrid and chemical, not just wood burning. He kicked open Clara's door. The room was an inferno, but the fire pattern was wrong. It centered on the desk where Clara's survey materials would have been, spreading outward in an unnatural pattern. Lamp oil. Someone had doused the desk with lamp oil. Elias grabbed what he could, a carpet bag, some clothes, and retreated as the ceiling began to crack. Outside, a bucket brigade had formed, but it was too late for the upper floor. Clara stood with Mrs. Holloway, her face pale as she watched her work burn. "My notes, 3 weeks of measurements, observations." Her voice broke. "I'm sorry," Elias said, handing her the salvaged carpet bag. "But I think you know this wasn't an accident." Sheriff Kincaid arrived as the last flames were being doused, surveying the damage with practiced indifference. "Shame about the fire. These old buildings, dry wood. Accidents happen." "Accident?" Clara stepped forward, fury replacing shock. "Someone deliberately burned my room." "Now, miss, you're upset. Understandable. But without evidence?" "The evidence is the lamp oil." Elias interrupted. "The burn pattern? Any fool can see." "Careful, Boone," Kincaid warned. "You're already on thin ice. Don't add false accusations to your troubles." That evening, Elias found Clara at Doc Finch's house, where she'd taken temporary refuge. The doctor had offered her spare room and, more importantly, her protection. Rosalind Finch might be a woman in a man's profession, but she'd delivered half the babies in the county and commanded respect even Vernon Cutter couldn't buy. "I've made a decision," Clara announced when Elias and June arrived with a basket of food from their ranch. "I'm not leaving." "Miss Hart." "Clara, please." She managed a tired smile. "I think we're past formalities. Someone burned my work because it threatens them. That tells me I'm on the right track. It also tells you they're willing to destroy evidence," Elias pointed out. "Next time, it might not be just paper they burn." "I know." She met his eyes steadily. "But if I run now, nothing changes. The small farmers continue to struggle. The Cutters of the world keep controlling who thrives and who withers. Is that the lesson we want to teach our children?" June, who'd been quietly setting out the food, spoke up. "Mama used to say that doing right isn't about being safe. It's about being able to look in the mirror." Clara's eyes softened. "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was," June said simply. Later, as Elias and June prepared to leave, Clara pulled him aside. "I need to continue my survey, but I also need to be smart about it. Would you consider helping me? You know the land, the people, and after yesterday, I trust you." Elias thought about the strange boot prints, the conveniently timed fire, the weight of Cutter influence pressing down on the town like the noon sun. He thought about Sarah, about the promises made beside a grave, about the kind of world he wanted June to inherit. "I'll help," he said. "But we do it my way. Careful, smart, and we start by figuring out who's been walking around in those worn heel boots." Clara offered her hand like a man would, a firm shake to seal a bargain. Partners, then. Partners. As they rode home through the gathering dusk, June was quiet until they could see their ranch house in the distance. "Daddies, are we in danger?" Elias wouldn't lie to her. "Could be, little bird. But sometimes danger comes whether we invite it or not. The question is what we do when it arrives." "We stand up," June said firmly. "Like you did yesterday. Like we're doing now." "That's right. But we also prepare. Tomorrow. You'll stay with Doc Finch while I'm out, and we're going to start keeping the rifle loaded by the door." That night, after June was asleep, Elias sat on the porch, watching the stars and thinking. He'd built a quiet life here after Sarah's death, focused on raising June and keeping to himself. Now that quiet was shattered, and he could feel the storm building like pressure before rain. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. Another answered, then silence, heavy and waiting. Change was coming to Dry Willow, one way or another. The only question was whether it would flow like water, bringing life, or crash like a flood, leaving destruction in its wake. The town hall stood at the center of Dry Willow like a tired sentry, its whitewash peeling in the desert sun. Inside, voices rose and fell like waves against shore as the monthly council meeting stretched into its second hour. Elias sat in the back row with June, watching the proceedings with growing disgust. Mayor Pike presided from behind a scarred oak table, flanked by the 5 council members. Doc Finch sat rigid in her chair, the only woman on the council and the only one who seemed willing to speak truth. Beside her, Reverend Hale clutched his Bible like a shield, while the 3 merchant representatives shifted nervously whenever Vernon Cutter's name arose. "The matter before us," Pike said, mopping his perpetual sweat, "is Miss Hart's request for town support of the Territorial Irrigation Survey." Clara stood at the front, composed despite the hostile atmosphere. She'd spent the morning recreating her burned notes from memory, and fatigue showed in the shadows under her eyes. "Gentlemen and Dr. Finch," she began, "the Territorial Commission has authorized a preliminary study of water distribution methods that could benefit all residents, not just the largest landholders. I'm simply asking for safe passage to complete my survey." "Safe passage," Vernon Cutter's voice boomed from the doorway. The big rancher entered like he owned the place, which, in many ways, he did. Expensive suit, silver watch chain, boots that had never worked a day. Behind him, Hank lurked with his arm in a sling, courtesy of Doc Finch's treatment after yesterday's altercation. "Miss Hart seems to think our town is dangerous," Cutter continued, taking a seat without invitation. "I wonder where she got that idea. Perhaps from having her room set ablaze," Doc Finch suggested tartly. "Accident," Cutter said with a wave. "These boarding house fires happen. Tragic, but hardly suspicious." Clara's hands tightened on her satchel. "Mr. Cutter, the irrigation proposal would actually benefit your ranch as well. Regulated water flow means—" "I know what it means." Cutter interrupted. "Government men poking around my property. Bureaucrats deciding how much water I can use on land my family's worked for 30 years. Rules and fees and papers to file." He leaned back, chair creaking under his weight. "We've done fine managing our own water. Thank you." "Have we?" The voice came from the crowd. Ben Miller, whose small farm had withered during last summer's drought. "Easy to say when you control Miller's wash upstream. My corn died while your cattle drank deep." Other voices joined in. Farmers, shopkeepers, anyone who'd felt the squeeze of Cutter's water monopoly. Pike hammered his gavel frantically. "Order will have order." Elias noticed Reverend Hale lean toward Pike, whispering urgently. The mayor's face went a shade paler, and Elias could guess the message Cutter held the note on the church building. "Perhaps," Pike said when quiet returned, "we should table this discussion until cooler heads." "No." Clara stepped forward. "People are suffering now. Every season we delay means more failed farms, more families driven out. I have the data." "Data?" Hank Cutter laughed from his position by the door. "Lady, you can't survey land from a boarding house bed." "Then I'll survey it from horseback," Clara shot back, "with or without town support." Vernon Cutter stood slowly, his presence filling the room. "Miss Hart, you seem like an educated woman. Surely you understand that some things are better left as they are. The natural order, you might say. Big fish, little fish." His smile was cold as winter wind. "I'd hate to see you become discouraged." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Elias had heard enough. He stood, lifting June onto his hip. "The natural order," he said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence, "includes rain falling on rich and poor alike. Funny how that changes when men get involved." Cutter's eyes fixed on him. "Ah, Boone, I heard you've been playing hero. How's that working out for you?" "Better than playing the villain, I expect." June pressed her face against his shoulder, but her small voice was clear. "My mama said bullies are just scared boys pretending to be big." Someone in the crowd chuckled. Cutter's face darkened. "Control your child, Boone." "She's speaking truth. If that bothers you, might be time to examine why." Doc Finch stood. "I move to vote on Miss Hart's request. All in favor of supporting the irrigation survey." Her hand rose alone. The three merchants looked at their laps. Reverend Hale clutched his Bible tighter. Pike didn't even pretend to consider it. "Motion fails," Pike said quickly. "Meeting adjourned." Outside, the afternoon sun struck like a hammer. Clara stood on the boardwalk, shoulders straight but defeat clear in her eyes. Doc Finch emerged behind her, fury radiating from every line of her body. "Cowards!" the doctor spat. "Every last one of them, except you, Elias." "I wasn't a council member." "Easy to speak when you've got no vote." "Nevertheless." Clara turned to him. "Thank you. And June, thank you too. Your mother raised you well." June peeked out from behind Elias's leg. "You're not giving up, are you?" Clara knelt to June's level. "What do you think I should do?" "Keep trying. Daddy says water always finds a way. Even through rock, it just takes time." Wise words. Clara stood, addressing Elias. "I'll need to survey Coyote Springs tomorrow. It's the key to the eastern distribution route." That's near Cutter Land, Doc Finch warned. Adjacent to, not on. Clara corrected. I've checked the territory maps. Elias considered. I know a back trail. Longer, but less likely to be watched. Can you ride? I grew up in Missouri. I can manage. Dawn, then, Doc, can June stay with you? Of course. The doctor ruffled June's hair. We'll work on her letters. Maybe write a letter to the territorial governor about town councils that bow to cattle barons. That evening, Elias checked his weapons and prepared for tomorrow's ride. The Spencer rifle was clean, the Colt oiled, ammunition sorted. He was examining his saddle when June appeared in the doorway. You're worried, she observed. Cautious, he corrected, though she was right. There's a difference. June climbed onto the workbench, swinging her legs. Tell me about Mama again, about how you met. It was her favorite story, especially when she sensed trouble. Elias set down the saddle and leaned against the bench. Your Mama was teaching school in Amarillo when I rode through with a cattle drive. Prettiest thing I ever saw. Standing on that schoolhouse step giving what for to some cowboy who'd cursed in front of her students. And you asked her to dance? Eventually. Took me 3 days to work up the nerve. She said yes, but only if I promised to watch my language. He smiled at the memory. I haven't cursed since, except in my head. And she made you want to be better. Every day. Elias smoothed June's hair. Even now. I ask myself what she'd do. Usually, the answer's pretty clear. Is that why we're helping Miss Clara? Because Mama would? Partly, but also because it's right. And because someday, this will be your world. I want it to be fair for you. June was quiet for a moment. I think Mama would like Miss Clara. I think so too. Later, after June was asleep, Elias made one last check of the property. The mysterious boot prints hadn't returned, but he'd noticed other signs. Horse tracks on the ridge. The glint of sun on metal that morning that could have been field glasses. They were being watched. The question was when watching would turn to action. Inside, he paused at the small table that served as Sarah's memorial. Her Bible, her wedding ring, a photograph from their wedding day. In the picture, she looked directly at the camera with that determined smile that had captured him completely. I'm trying, Sarah, he whispered, to teach her right, to stand for something, but I'm scared I'm putting her in danger. The photograph, of course, had no answers. But looking at Sarah's face, Elias remembered her final words. Make sure she knows her worth isn't in being quiet or small. It's in her heart and her choices. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. Tonight, he would plan, prepare, and trust that doing right was its own protection, even when it wasn't. A coyote called in the distance, or maybe it wasn't a coyote at all. Elias checked the door locks one more time and tried to find sleep, the loaded rifle within arm's reach. Change was coming to Dry Willow. The only question was whether the town would rise to meet it or be swept away by fear. In his heart, Elias knew which way Sarah would have bet. The harder question was whether he had the strength to prove her right. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows like bones. Somewhere in the darkness, forces were aligning, some for progress, some for the status quo, all convinced they were fighting for survival. Tomorrow, the real survey would begin, and with it, perhaps, the true test of what Dry Willow was made of. The smell hit Elias first, acrid smoke mixed with lamp oil, carrying on the night wind like a harbinger. He jerked awake, instantly alert. Through the window, orange light flickered where no light should be. The barn was burning. June! He grabbed his boots, jamming them on as he ran to her room. She was already sitting up, eyes wide with fear. Get your coat and shoes, now! Outside, flames licked up the barn's east wall, spreading fast, too fast for accident. The horses were screaming, trapped inside. Elias's heart clenched. Their livelihood, their transportation. June's beloved pony Sugar all inside that inferno. Stay on the porch, he ordered June, then ran for the barn. The heat hit like a physical wall, but he yanked open the doors. Smoke billowed out, thick and choking. The horses milled in panic, eyes rolling white. Easy, easy. He grabbed lead ropes, working by feel and memory. His old mare Buttermilk came first, then the pack horse. Sugar was in the far stall, rearing and screaming. The little pinto's fear nearly broke his heart. The roof beam cracked overhead, showering sparks. Elias threw his coat over Sugar's head, grabbed her halter, and pulled. The pony resisted, then suddenly bolted forward, nearly trampling him in her panic to escape. He stumbled out after her, lungs burning, to find June trying to calm the terrified animals. Behind them, the barn's roof collapsed with a roar, sending a column of sparks into the star-filled sky. "Daddy!" June flew into his arms, sobbing. "I thought you were—" "I'm fine, little bird. We're all fine." But looking at the burning wreckage of their barn, Elias felt fury build in his chest. First Clara's room, now this. The message was clear. Hoofbeats pounded up the trail. Elias pushed June behind him, hand on his gun. But it was Doc Finch's buggy careening into the yard. The doctor pulled up sharp, her nightgown visible under a hastily donned coat. "Saw the flames from town," she gasped. "Dear God, Elias!" "Take June," he said quietly. "Please." "Where are you going?" He didn't answer, but Doc Finch read his face. "Don't be a fool. You can't prove anything." "I don't need to prove it. I need to stop it." "Elias." Clara appeared from the buggy's other side. Doc must have collected her too. "This is my fault. If I hadn't asked for your help—" "This isn't on you." He knelt before June. "You go with Doc Finch. I'll be along soon." "You're going after them." It wasn't a question. June's soot-streaked face was solemn beyond her years. "Be careful, Daddy." He kissed her forehead. "Always am." But he wasn't careful. He saddled Buttermilk with sharp, angry movements and rode hard for town. The moon was new, the darkness complete. But he knew these trails like his own heartbeat. More importantly, he knew where men went to celebrate their crimes. The Copper Star was quiet for once. Most patrons home in bed, but a light burned in the back room where high-stakes poker ran all night. Elias tied Buttermilk and went in the back way, surprising Miguel's nephew, who was supposed to be watching the door. "Senor Boone." "Go home, Pablo, now." The boy fled. Elias pushed through the curtain into the poker room. 5 men sat around the table. 3 he didn't know, probably drifters. The other 2 were Hank Cutter and Roy Bell. Whiskey bottles at their elbows and ash from the fire still gray on Roy's boots. "Well, well," Hank's words slurred slightly. "The hero appears. Heard you had some excitement tonight. Boone, shame about your barn." Elias moved fast. The table flipped, cards and coins flying. His fist connected with Roy's jaw before the man could rise. Hank reached for his gun, but Elias caught his wrist, slamming it against the wall until the weapon dropped. "You burned my barn." Each word came out precise, controlled. "My daughter could have been hurt trying to save those horses." "Prove it," Hank gasped, struggling against Elias's grip. "Don't need to." Elias drew his Colt, pressed it under Hank's chin. "Your brother thinks he owns this town. Maybe he does, but he doesn't own me, and he sure as hell doesn't own my daughter's safety." "You won't shoot." But Hank's voice wavered. "You're not a killer." "You're right." Elias stepped back, holstering the gun. "But I am a father. You come near my property again, you threaten my girl's safety, and I'll show you the difference between won't and haven't yet. Clear?" Hank nodded, rubbing his throat. Roy groaned from the floor, jaw already swelling. The 3 drifters hadn't moved, smart enough to recognize a private fight. "One more thing," Elias said from the doorway. Tell your brother his message was received. Also, tell him it didn't work. Miss Hart and I will be surveying Coyote Springs tomorrow as planned." Outside, his hands shook as the rage drained away. Violence solved nothing, Sarah would have said, but sometimes it cleared the air like a thunderstorm, leaving space for what came next. He found Sheriff Kincaid waiting by Buttermilk, badge glinting in the lamplight. "Heard there was trouble at the Copper Star," the sheriff said mildly. "Figured I'd find you here. Just having a conversation about fire safety." "That's so," Kincaid studied him. "Also heard your barn burned tonight. Terrible accident." "No accident about it." "Can you prove that?" Elias mounted Buttermilk. "Can you prove I was here tonight?" They stared at each other. Lawman and citizen, both knowing the law had little to do with their interaction. Finally. Kincaid stepped aside. "You're playing a dangerous game, Boone. Only game in town. Seems like..." At Doc Finch's house, Elias found June asleep on the parlor sofa, Sugar's lead rope still clutched in her hand. The pony stood guard beside her, allowed inside given the circumstances. "She wouldn't let go," Doc Finch said softly. "Said Sugar was scared and needed a friend." Clara sat by the window, still in her traveling clothes. "Did you find them?" "I found who I was looking for. And now they know there's a cost to their actions." He sank into a chair, exhaustion hitting all at once. "Won't stop them, but might make them think twice." "I've been thinking," Clara said, "about patterns. Your barn, my room. They're targeting property, not people. They want to scare us, not martyrs." Doc Finch snorted. "Small comfort when you're losing everything you've built." "No, she's right," Elias said slowly. "Vernon Cutter's smart. Dead bodies bring federal marshals. Burned barns just bring insurance claims." "So what do we do?" He looked at his daughter, sleeping despite everything, still holding tight to what she'd saved. "We rebuild, we survey, we show them that burning barns doesn't burn resolve." "The lumber mill owes me favors," Doc Finch offered. "And I know men who'd help raise a new barn for the price of a meal." "I can cover some costs," Clara added. "The Territorial Commission provides a small expense account." Elias felt something ease in his chest. This was what Cutter didn't understand. Every push created pushback. Every act of intimidation forged new alliances. "Thank you," he said simply. "Both of you." Dawn came too soon, despite the night's events. Elias kept his promise to escort Clara to Coyote Springs. They left June with Doc Finch again, though the girl protested. "I should help rebuild," June insisted. "It's my barn too." "And you will," Elias promised. "But today, I need you safe so I can focus on keeping Miss Clara safe. Can you do that for me?" June nodded reluctantly, then surprised Clara with a fierce hug. "Find what you need to help people," she whispered. "Make it worth it." The ride to Coyote Springs took 3 hours by the back trail, through country that grew progressively rougher. Clara proved as capable on horseback as she'd claimed, handling her borrowed mount with easy competence. "Tell me about your wife," she said as they watered the horses at a hidden spring. "Sarah, what do you want to know?" How she found the courage to stand for her principles. It couldn't have been easy, being that kind of woman out here. Elias smiled, remembering. She said courage was just fear that had said its prayers. Every morning, she'd read her Bible, then face whatever the day brought. He paused. "She'd have admired what you're doing." "I wish I could have met her." They reached Coyote Springs by noon. Clara immediately went to work, taking measurements, making notes, sketching water flow patterns. Elias kept watch, rifle across his saddle, but the land stayed empty. "This is perfect," Clara said, excitement creeping into her professional tone. The elevation, the natural rock formations. A small dam here could create a reservoir. Channels cut there and there would distribute water across the whole eastern valley, turning dust into farmland. Elias mused. No wonder Cutter's worried. It's more than that. Clara showed him her sketches. With proper management, there's enough water for everyone. His ranch, the small farms, even expansion. The competition is artificial, created by hoarding. A glint of light on the ridge caught Elias's eye. Field glasses, maybe, or a rifle scope. He shifted casually, putting himself between Clara and the ridge. Time to go, he said quietly. She followed his gaze, understanding immediately. They mounted up, riding steadily but without panic. The watcher didn't follow, but Elias knew they'd been marked. Back in town, they found unexpected activity at Elias's ranch. 24 men were already clearing the burned debris, lumber stacked nearby. Ben Miller directed the work, his sun-weathered face creased in determination. Figured you'd need a new barn, Miller said as they rode up. Funny how many folks had the same thought. Even Tom Harper was there, guilt apparently overcoming his caution. Reverend Hale blessed the work, and if his prayers included subtle pleas for peace, at least he'd shown up. June ran to meet them, covered in soot from helping clear debris. Look, Daddy, it's like a barn raising from your stories. And it was. Women arrived with food. Children carried water, and by sunset, the skeleton of a new barn stood against the sky, smaller than the old one, built from donated scraps, but solid and real. Vernon Cutter himself appeared as the work was finishing, sitting his expensive horse like a king surveying subjects. The workers fell silent. Quite a gathering, he said mildly. Community spirit. How touching. What do you want? Cutter. Elias stepped forward, hand careful near his gun. Just wanted to express my condolences about your barn. These old buildings, they're fire traps. Good thing no one was hurt. His eyes found Clara among the workers. Be a shame if more accidents happened. Maybe folks should be more careful about the company they keep. Maybe folks should be more careful about the enemies they make. Elias replied evenly. Cutter's smile was thin as paper. Is that a threat? Boon. Just an observation. Push people too far, they stop backing up. We'll see about that. Cutter turned his horse. Enjoy your new barn, however long it lasts. After he left, the crowd dispersed slowly. Handshakes and promises of continued help. Clara lingered, helping June feed the horses in their temporary corral. He won't stop, she said quietly to Elias. Neither will we. She looked at him, something shifting in her expression. You're a good man, Elias Boone. Your daughter's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have friends like you. The word friends hung between them. Inadequate but necessary. Whatever else might be growing between them would have to wait. For now, survival took precedence over softer feelings. That night, June insisted on sleeping in the house despite the smell of smoke. As Elias tucked her in, she asked, Are we winning? He considered the question seriously. We're not losing. Sometimes that's enough. Mama would be proud of you. Of us, he corrected. She'd be proud of us. Outside, guards walked the property. Volunteers from the barn raising, taking shifts without being asked. The new barn stood skeletal in the moonlight, a testament to community over intimidation. The war for Dry Willow's future had begun in earnest. But tonight, for the first time, Elias began to believe they might actually win it. The wanted poster appeared overnight, nailed to every prominent wall in Dry Willow. Wanted Elias Boone, assault, arson, inciting public disorder, $500 reward. Below the text, a rough sketch that could have been any man with a weathered face and determined eyes. June saw it first, on their morning trip to Harper's store. She stood frozen, staring at her father's supposed crimes listed in bold black letters. It's lies, she whispered, tears starting. All lies. I know, little bird. Elias gently turned her away from the poster. But lies written down can be as dangerous as truth. Tom Harper emerged from his store, wringing his hands. Elias, I'm sorry, but I can't. That is, with this poster. You can't serve us, I understand. Elias kept his voice level, though the betrayal stung. Come on. June. They found similar reactions throughout town. The barbers suddenly had no openings. The restaurant was unexpectedly closed. Even people who'd helped raise his barn now crossed the street to avoid him. Only Doc Finch's door remained open. She met them with tight-lipped fury. Clara beside her. Kincaid signed those posters, Doc said, but we all know who really wrote them. Vernon Cutter's declaring war. He's isolating you, Clara added, showing a stack of similar posters. Making you a pariah so no one will stand with you. It's working, Elias admitted. Harper wouldn't even sell me flour. Then we'll get creative. Doc Finch's eyes glinted. I've been doctoring this town for 15 years. Let's see them refuse medical care when little Johnny breaks his arm or Mary needs birthing help. That afternoon, Sheriff Kincaid arrived at the ranch with 2 deputies. Elias met them in the yard, June watching anxiously from the window. Boone, Kincaid said, trying to sound official. I'm here to arrest you on charges of trumped-up nonsense, Elias suggested. You were there that night at the Copper Star. You know what really happened. I know you assaulted 2 men and threatened them with a weapon. After they burned my barn, with my daughter inside. Kincaid shifted uncomfortably. Can't prove that, but witnesses saw you attack the Cutter boys. What witnesses? The poker players who scattered like quail? Doesn't matter. I have a warrant. Elias studied the sheriff's weak face, the deputies who wouldn't meet his eyes. Fighting would only prove Cutter's point about him being dangerous, but surrendering meant leaving June vulnerable. I'll come quietly, he said finally. On one condition, my daughter stays with Doc Finch, not in some county orphanage. That's acceptable. June burst from the house. No, you can't take him. He didn't do anything wrong. June. Elias knelt, catching her shoulders. Remember what we talked about. Sometimes standing strong means standing smart. I need you to stay with Doc Finch. Help Miss Clara. Can you do that? But what if they hurt you? They won't. Too many people watching now. He hoped that was true. Be brave, little bird. This isn't over. The jail was a stone building that baked in summer and froze in winter. Elias's cell held a straw mattress, a bucket, and years of carved initials from previous occupants. Through the barred window, he could see the Copper Star, where this had all started. Clara visited that evening, bringing food since the jail meals were deliberately sparse. I've wired the territorial commissioner, she said, passing the basket through the bars. Explained the situation. Help could be coming. Could be. Politics move slowly, but I also found something interesting. She produced a ledger. Tom Harper's debt records. Half the town owes money to Vernon Cutter, including Mayor Pike and Sheriff Kincaid. He's been buying loyalty for years. Explains a lot. Clara moved closer to the bars. Elias, I'm so sorry. This is happening because you helped me. This is happening because it needed to happen. Cutter's stranglehold had to break sometime. He managed a smile. Just wish June didn't have to see it. She's remarkable. Today she organized the other children to deliver messages between families who support you. Doc Finch calls her the littlest revolutionary, her mother's daughter. They sat in companionable silence until Kincaid ordered Clara to leave. As she gathered her things, she paused. I meant what I said before. You're a good man. When this is over, we'll talk about what comes next. Elias promised. That night, unable to sleep on the flea-infested mattress, Elias heard horses outside, multiple riders, moving with purpose. He pressed against the window but could see only shadows. Come morning, he understood. Every small farm that had supported him had received a visit. Fences cut, water troughs overturned, threats delivered in darkness. The message was clear: stand with Boone. Suffer the consequences. But something unexpected happened. Instead of cowering, the farmers got angry. Ben Miller was first, marching into town with his rifle and his 3 grown sons. "If Cutter wants a fight, he'll get one," Miller announced to anyone listening. "Man can't even keep his barn safe. Picks on women and children. That ain't strength. That's cowardice." Others followed. The Hendricks family, the Washburns, even old Pete Grayson, who'd never taken a side in anything. They gathered outside the jail, a growing crowd of the pushed too far. "Release Boone," someone shouted. "He ain't done nothing we wouldn't do." Kincaid emerged, sweating despite the morning cool. "Disperse. This is an unlawful assembly." "So's jailing a man on false charges," Doc Finch replied, standing at the crowd's front with June's hand in hers. "I've delivered half of you, doctored the other half. You know my word's good. Elias Boone's innocent, and we all know it." Clara stepped forward. "The Territorial Commission has been notified of irregularities in Dry Willow's legal system. They're very interested in how water rights are being monopolized through intimidation." "You can't threaten me," Kincaid blustered. "I'm not threatening. I'm informing. There's a difference." She held up a telegram. "Federal marshals are already en route to investigate." It was a bluff. The telegram was days old and mentioned only possible investigation. But Kincaid didn't know that. His face went pale under its sunburn. The crowd grew. Women brought food, turning the protest into an impromptu picnic. Children played around their parents' legs. June organized them into a choir, their young voices rising in Amazing Grace, her mother's favorite hymn. Vernon Cutter arrived at noon, his mere presence parting the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. He dismounted slowly, deliberately, every movement calculated to remind people of his power. "Good people of Dry Willow," he began, voice carrying without shouting, "you're being misled. This man Boone is a troublemaker, a violent—" "He's my daddy," June broke from Doc Finch's grasp, standing small but fierce before the cattle baron. "And you're the one who burned our barn. You're the bad man, not him." Cutter's face darkened. Someone control this child? Why? Clara stepped beside June. "Because she's telling the truth. Because even a 9-year-old can see through your lies." "The truth," Cutter said coldly, "is that I own half this town. The water, the land, the debts. Push me, and I'll collect every last cent." "Then do it," Ben Miller challenged. "Call in the debts. But remember, you can't run cattle without hands, can't ship beef without storekeepers, can't maintain an empire without an empire." The standoff stretched taut as fence wire. Then, unexpectedly, Reverend Hale spoke up. "Vernon, I've kept quiet too long. Yes, you hold the note on my church, but I hold something more important, my conscience. And it says jailing an innocent man to maintain power is wrong." "Anyone else want to commit financial suicide?" Cutter's voice could have frozen water, but more voices rose. Debts be damned. Enough was enough. Finally, Cutter turned to Kincaid. "Do your job. Sheriff, clear this mob." How?" "Use your deputies. Use force if necessary." But the 2 deputies were backing away. One was married to Miller's daughter. The other attended Reverend Hale's church. They wanted no part of attacking their neighbors. "Appears you've got a problem, Vernon," Doc Finch observed. "Power only works if people agree to be powerless." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Cutter's eyes. He'd ruled through economic pressure and selective intimidation, but he'd never faced unified opposition. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Not by half." He remounted, pausing to stare down at June. "You've got your daddy's stubborn streak, girl. Pray it doesn't get you hurt." "Leave her be," Elias called from his cell window. "Your fight's with me." "No," Clara said clearly. "It's with all of us now." After Cutter left, the crowd maintained its vigil. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Kincaid grew increasingly nervous. The federal marshal threat, even if exaggerated, clearly worried him, combined with the town's rebellion. "All right," he announced finally. "Given new information about the case, I'm releasing Boone pending further investigation." The cheer that went up could probably be heard at the Cutter Ranch when Elias walked free. June flew into his arms, both of them holding tight. "I was brave, Daddy, just like you said. Braver than me, little bird, much braver." Clara approached as the crowd began dispersing. "It's not over. Cutter will regroup, find new pressure points." "I know, but today we won something." Elias looked at the townspeople, neighbors who'd become allies. "We showed him he's not invincible. That matters." Doc Finch bustled up. "You're staying with me tonight. No arguments. That ranch is too vulnerable until we figure out next steps." As they walked through town, Elias noticed the wanted posters were already coming down, torn away by anonymous hands. In their place, someone had nailed up Clara's water survey maps, showing the promised irrigation routes. "The future versus the past," Clara murmured, seeing his gaze. "That's what this is really about." "Then we'd better make sure the future wins," Elias replied. That night, safe in Doc Finch's parlor, June fell asleep in Elias's lap while the adults planned. The battle was won, but the war continued. Vernon Cutter wouldn't accept defeat easily. But looking at his daughter's peaceful face, at Clara's determined eyes, at Doc Finch's righteous anger, Elias felt something he hadn't in years: hope. Not just for survival, but for real change. Sarah would have been proud. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to see them through whatever came next. June noticed them first fresh wagon tracks leading away from town toward Mesquite Narrows. Too deep for an empty wagon. Too careful for honest business. She'd developed sharp eyes these past weeks, watching for trouble while helping Clara with the survey work. "Miss Clara went that way an hour ago," June told her father, worry creasing her young face. "Said she was meeting someone about water rights documentation." Elias felt ice in his veins. Clara had mentioned no such meeting to him or Doc Finch. Who told her about this meeting? A man came to Doc's house, said he had old Spanish land grants that proved water access. Clara got excited, said it could help the legal case. The setup was obvious now. Mesquite Narrows, a box canyon with one way in, walls too steep to climb, perfect for an ambush. "Run to Ben Miller's place," Elias instructed, already saddling Buttermilk. "Tell him what you told me, then stay there." "I want to come." "June." His tone stopped her protest. "This is grown-up trouble. I need you safe so I can focus on helping Miss Clara. Please." She nodded, tears threatening but held back. "Be careful, Daddy. Bring her home." Elias rode hard, pushing Buttermilk to her limits. The trail to Mesquite Narrows wound through increasingly rough country red rock formations that threw back sound. Sparse juniper offering little cover. Perfect country for someone who didn't want witnesses. He slowed as he neared the canyon mouth, ground tying Buttermilk behind a boulder. The wagon tracks continued inside, along with 3 sets of horse prints. Clara's borrowed mare would make 4. Moving on foot now, Elias worked his way up the canyon's sloped entrance, using shadows and stone for cover. Voices echoed off the narrow walls, Clara's educated tone mixing with rougher accents. "Told you, I don't have any money with me," Clara was saying, fear controlled but present. "The survey documents are all back in town." "Not interested in your papers?" Hank Cutter's voice, slightly slurred as always. "This is about teaching lessons, about showing folks what happens when they don't mind their own business." Elias bellied up to a rock outcropping, peering over carefully. The scene below made his heart clench. Clara stood with her back against the canyon wall, Hank and Roy flanking her. A third man, someone Elias didn't recognize, held their horses. Clara's mare was nowhere visible, probably run off to strand her. "My disappearance won't stop the irrigation project," Clara said steadily. Others will continue the work. Maybe, Roy agreed. But they'll think twice, knowing what happened to you. Besides, Hank here's got personal reasons. You cost him pride at the Copper Star. That was Boone, not me. Same difference now. You're his woman, aren't you? I'm nobody's woman. I'm a surveyor for the Territorial Commission. Hank stepped closer, close enough that Clara pressed back against the rock. See, that's your problem, thinking you're something you're not. This ain't Philadelphia or wherever. Out here, women know their place. And men know theirs, Elias called out, standing slowly. Usually not cornering ladies in box canyons. All three men spun. The stranger went for his gun, but Elias had already drawn. His shot was precise, hitting the man's gun hand. The weapon flew into the dirt as the man cried out, clutching his bleeding fingers. Drop the iron, boys, slow and careful. Hank and Roy complied, faces dark with fury. Clara sagged with relief but didn't move, smart enough not to complicate the situation. Should have minded your own business, Boone, Hank snarled. This ain't your fight. Made it mine when you touched her. Elias moved down the slope, keeping his Colt trained on them. Now back away, all of you. They shuffled back. Elias positioned himself between them and Clara, not turning his back on the threat. You all right? He asked her quietly. Yes, frightened but unharmed. It was so stupid of me to come alone. Save the recriminations. We need to move. He'd counted one rifle on Roy's horse. Probably more weapons they couldn't see. Once the shock wore off, 3 against 1 weren't good odds, even with 1 wounded. But the canyon's acoustics worked both ways. New voices echoed from the entrance. Ben Miller and his sons. Responding to June's alarm, the cavalry, rough but welcome. In here, Ben, Elias called. Got a situation. The appearance of reinforcements changed everything. Hank's bravado crumbled as 4 armed farmers blocked the canyon's only exit. The wounded stranger sat in the dirt, cradling his hand. Roy looked ready to bolt but had nowhere to go. Well now, Ben Miller drawled, taking in the scene. Looks like we interrupted something. You boys having a party without inviting the rest of us? This is private business. Hank tried, but his voice lacked conviction. Funny definition of private luring a woman to an isolated spot. Miller's eldest son, Jacob, had Clara's mare on a lead rope. Found this pretty lady running loose, figured her rider might need help. Clara moved at last, walking steadily to reclaim her horse. Her hands shook slightly as she took the reins, the only sign of how frightened she'd been. I believe these men were about to leave, she said with admirable composure. Weren't you, gentlemen? This ain't over, Hank promised, but it was empty bluster now. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, they had no choice but to mount up and ride out, taking their wounded companion with them. Elias didn't holster his gun until they were specks in the distance. Only then did Clara's composure crack. She leaned against her mare's neck, breathing shakily. Thank you, she whispered. I was so foolish. The document seemed so real, and I thought... You thought like a surveyor, not a frontier woman. Elias touched her shoulder gently. No shame in that, but from now on, we go nowhere alone. Agreed. Agreed. She straightened, color returning to her cheeks. How did you know? June saw the wagon tracks. Smart girl notices things. Pride colored his voice. She ran for help while I rode ahead. I owe her my thanks. And you, again. Clara met his eyes. This is becoming a dangerous habit. Mr. Boone. Elias, he corrected. And keeping you safe isn't a habit. It's a choice. Something shifted between them in that moment, acknowledged but not acted upon. Too much remained unsettled for softer feelings. The ride back was subdued. Ben Miller's presence kept conversation practical, discussing improved security, the federal marshal's impending arrival, the growing boldness of Cutter's tactics. "He's desperate," Miller observed. "Man don't risk kidnapping unless he's running out of options. Or unless he thinks he's untouchable." Clara countered. "The warrant against Elias burning the barn. Now this, he's escalating because no one stopped him yet." "Yet," Elias repeated. "That's the key word." They found Dry Willow in an uproar. Word of the attempted kidnapping had spread faster than wildfire. Doc Finch was organizing the women into a protection committee. Reverend Hale preached about wolves among the sheep from his church steps. Even Tom Harper, shamefaced but determined, offered his store as a safe house if needed. June waited at Miller's farm, pacing like a caged cat. When she saw them approaching, she broke into a run. "Miss Clara, you're safe." She hugged Clara fiercely, then turned to her father. "I did what you said. Got help fast as I could." "You did perfect, little bird. Your quick thinking made all the difference." Sheriff Kincaid appeared as they dismounted. Looking harried, "Heard there was trouble at Mesquite Narrows. Anyone want to file a complaint?" "Yes," Clara said firmly. "Attempted kidnapping, assault, criminal threatening. I'll sign whatever papers needed." Kincaid shifted. "You sure that's wise, making accusations against prominent citizens?" "Prominent criminals," Doc Finch interjected, joining them. "Do your job, Kincaid, or step aside for someone who will. The federal marshal will be very interested in how local law enforcement handles this," Clara added sweetly. Trapped, Kincaid took her statement, but everyone knew he'd delay, obfuscate, find reasons to do nothing. The law in Dry Willow still belonged to whoever paid its salary. That evening, Elias's small ranch became an impromptu war council. Clara spread her maps across the kitchen table, while Doc Finch tended the stranger's wounded hand. He'd been left at the jail, claiming he was just hired help who didn't know the plan. June helped serve coffee and listened with serious eyes. "We're at a crossroads," Clara said. "Cutter's showing he'll use violence to stop the irrigation project. We need to decide, push forward or wait for federal intervention. Waiting gives him time to regroup." Miller argued, "Man like that, he's got connections. Could get the whole project canceled with the right bribes. But pushing forward puts people at risk." Doc Finch countered. "Today was Clara. Tomorrow it could be any of us. Or our children." That sobered the room. Everyone looked at June, the youngest among them, representing all they hoped to protect and provide for. "What would Mama do?" June asked suddenly, looking at her father. Elias considered. "She'd pray on it first. Then she'd do what was right, even if it was dangerous. She'd say fear was a poor foundation for decisions." "Then I think we should keep going," June declared. "The water project helps everyone. That's worth being brave for." "From the mouths of babes," Elias thought. The adults exchanged glances, shamed and inspired by a child's clarity. "The surveying continues," Clara decided. "But with protection. We work in groups, armed and watchful. And we document everything, every threat, every incident. Build a case even a bought sheriff can't ignore." Agreement rumbled through the room. Plans were made, schedules coordinated. The irrigation project would proceed, but carefully, with the community's full support. As the meeting broke up, Clara lingered. June had fallen asleep on the sofa, exhausted by the day's drama. Elias covered her with Sarah's quilt, the one she'd stitched during her pregnancy. "She's remarkable," Clara said softly. "You've raised her well." "She raises herself, mostly. I just try to keep up." He walked Clara to the door. "Thank you for not giving up. Lesser people would have taken today as a sign to leave." "I'm not lesser people." She paused on the threshold. "Neither are you. What you did today, riding into danger for me, is what anyone would do." "No." Her hand found his, a brief squeeze. "It's what heroes do, whether you see it or not." She left before he could respond, probably wisely. Elias stood in the doorway, watching her disappear into Doc Finch's buggy, feeling things he hadn't felt since Sarah's death. Inside, June stirred. "Is Miss Clara gone?" "Just to Doc's house. Go back to sleep." "Daddy, I think Mama would like her too, just so you know." Elias smoothed his daughter's hair. "What makes you say that?" "Because she makes you smile the way you used to. Before." June yawned. "And because she's brave like Mama was. Different brave, but still brave." Out of the mouths of babes indeed. Elias sat watch that night, rifle across his knees, thinking about bravery and choices and the price of change. Somewhere in the darkness, Vernon Cutter was planning his next move. But here in this small house, a father and daughter held their ground, part of something larger than themselves. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they'd won. Clara was safe. The community was united. And for the first time since Sarah's death, Elias felt like he was building something instead of just surviving. The future was worth fighting for. He just prayed they were all strong enough to win. The morning of the public demonstration dawned clear and bright, as if nature herself approved of their plans. In the town square, farmers and townspeople gathered around a remarkable sight, a working model of the proposed irrigation system, built from wood and canvas, with water flowing through miniature channels. Clara stood beside the model, her surveyor's notes spread on a makeshift table. Doc Finch and several farmers' wives had sewn a large banner reading, "Water for All, Progress for Dry Willow." June helped the other children paint measurement stakes in bright colors, each one marked with dates and water levels from Clara's surveys. "It's brilliant," Ben Miller said, watching water flow through the scale model. "Shows exactly how the system would work. Even a fool could understand it." "Let's hope Vernon Cutter has more sense than a fool," Elias replied, though he doubted it. He'd positioned himself where he could watch all approaches to the square, rifle within reach but not displayed. They'd learned caution these past days. Clara began her presentation as the crowd grew. She spoke clearly, without the technical language that might confuse, showing how small dams at key points would create reservoirs, how channels following natural contours would distribute water across the valley, how every farm, large and small, would benefit from reliable irrigation. "The beauty is in its simplicity," she explained, using a stick to trace water flow. "We're not fighting nature, we're working with it. The same water that now floods in spring and disappears in summer would be managed, stored, shared fairly." "What about cost?" asked Tom Harper, genuinely interested despite his past wavering. Clara produced a ledger. "Initial construction would require community investment, yes, but within 2 seasons, increased crop yields would repay the cost 3 times over. The Territorial Commission has already approved matching funds if the community commits." The crowd murmured approval. Elias noticed more people arriving. Word was spreading. Even some of Cutter's ranch hands lingered at the edges, listening despite themselves. "This is a trick," the voice cut through the gathering like a whip crack. Vernon Cutter pushed through the crowd, his lawyer Pemberton beside him, Sheriff Kincaid trailing behind. "A scheme to steal water rights legally held for decades." "No one's stealing anything," Clara replied calmly. "The surveys show ample water for everyone if properly managed. Your ranch would actually benefit from flood control." "My ranch doesn't need government meddling." Cutter's face was florid. "And neither does this town. You people are being sold false promises by an outsider and a troublemaker." He pointed at Clara and Elias in turn. The crowd stirred uneasily, but didn't disperse. "Actually," a new voice interjected, "I'd like to hear more about these promises." Everyone turned. A woman in traveling clothes stood at the crowd's edge, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, carrying herself with unmistakable authority. Behind her, 2 men in federal badges lounged against their horses. "Judge Abigail Stone," she announced. "Circuit Court of the Territory of New Mexico. I received some interesting telegrams about legal irregularities in Dry Willow." Thought I'd investigate personally. Kincaid went pale. Cutter's lawyer whispered urgently in his employer's ear. Clara's eyes lit with hope. Your Honor. Clara stepped forward. I'm Clara Hart with the Territorial Commission. We're demonstrating a proposed irrigation system that would... I can see what you're demonstrating. Miss Hart, quite impressive. The judge studied the model with interest. Continue your presentation. I'll observe. Clara resumed with renewed confidence, but Cutter wasn't finished. This is highly irregular. You can't just ride in here. Actually, I can... Judge Stone's voice could freeze whiskey. It's called circuit riding. Mr. Cutter. Been the law since before you were born. Now, you can observe quietly, or my marshals can escort you somewhere less disruptive. Choose. Cutter subsided, but his eyes promised retribution. Elias moved closer to Clara and June, hand near his pistol. The federal presence changed things, but desperate men made dangerous choices. Clara finished her presentation with a flourish, pouring a full bucket through the model to show how excess water would be channeled to storage rather than lost to flooding. The crowd applauded. Several farmers signed a petition of support on the spot. Impressive work, Judge Stone commented. I'd like to see your survey data, Miss Hart, and any documentation of local opposition to your work. I have extensive records, Clara assured her, including several incidents of intimidation and property destruction. Lies Hank Cutter burst from the crowd. That woman's been stirring up trouble since she arrived. Her and Boone both... Interesting. The judge's gaze found Elias. You'd be the man falsely arrested last week, the one whose barn was mysteriously burned. Yes, ma'am. And you, young man, she addressed Hank, would be the one who allegedly assaulted Miss Hart in the saloon and later attempted kidnapping at Mesquite Narrows. Hank's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Your Honor, Pemberton the lawyer interjected smoothly. These are unproven allegations. My clients are respected members of this community, whose respect seems to come at gunpoint. Doc Finch interrupted. Your Honor, I've been documenting injuries and incidents for weeks. The pattern is clear. I'll review all evidence. Judge Stone's tone suggested the matter was settled. In the meantime, this demonstration may continue. Any interference will be considered contempt of court. Clear. The threat of federal authority accomplished what local courage couldn't. Cutter and his men withdrew, but Elias caught Cutter's parting look at Clara. Pure venom. The rest of the day passed in celebration. Farmers studied the model, asked questions, made suggestions. Clara recorded every comment, refining her plans. June led children in a water cycle song she'd composed. Even cautious townspeople began imagining dry willow with green fields instead of dust. It's working, Clara told Elias during a quiet moment. They're seeing the possibilities. You've given them hope. That's powerful. She looked at him sidelong. I couldn't have done it without you. Without all of you. We're partners. Remember? Yes. Something in her tone made him look closer. Elias, when this is over... Papa June ran up, breathless with excitement. Judge Stone wants to talk to you. The moment broken. They found the judge examining Clara's survey notes with professional interest. Thorough work, Miss Hart. The commission chose well. She turned to Elias. Mr. Boone, I'll need your testimony about recent events. The burning, the false arrest, the attempts on Miss Hart. Happy to provide it, Your Honor. Good, because what I'm seeing here is a pattern of corruption and intimidation that goes beyond simple water disputes. She lowered her voice. Vernon Cutter has influence, but not immunity. If we can prove systematic law-breaking, even he isn't above justice. That evening, the judge held court in the town hall, not a trial, just a preliminary hearing. But the room overflowed with spectators. Clara presented her evidence methodically, the burned documents, The witnessed assault, the kidnapping attempt. Doc Finch added medical testimony. Even Tom Harper, finding courage at last, admitted seeing Hank and Roy threatening Clara that first day. Cutter's lawyer fought every point, but Judge Stone was unmoved. When Kincaid tried to minimize the charges, she produced telegrams from other towns detailing similar complaints about the sheriff's selective enforcement. "Seems you have a reputation, Sheriff Kincaid," she observed dryly. "Not a good one." The hearing's climax came when June was called to testify. Elias wanted to object. No child should face such pressure, but June insisted. "I want to tell the truth," she said firmly. "Mama always said truth matters most." On the stand, June was composed beyond her years. She described the barn burning, her father's fear, the mysterious boot prints. When Pemberton tried to confuse her, she simply stared at him with Sarah's steady gaze and repeated her truth. "The boots had worn heels. I drew them in the dirt to remember. Want to see?" Even hardened spectators smiled at her earnestness. Judge Stone thanked June gravely, treating her testimony with full respect. The hearing concluded without immediate rulings. The judge would consider all evidence, but the damage was done. Cutter's intimidation tactics were now federal record. Kincaid's corruption was documented. The tide was turning. Outside, as people dispersed into the evening, Vernon Cutter confronted Elias directly. "You think you've won something, this judge will leave, and things will go back to how they've always been. I'll see you broken. Boone, you and your brat and that meddling woman. Threaten my daughter again," Elias said quietly, "and federal marshals will be the least of your concerns." Cutter laughed. "You wouldn't dare. You're too civilized, too weak, just like your wife was too weak to survive out here." The words were calculated to provoke, and they nearly worked. Elias's hand moved toward his gun, but Clara's touch stopped him. "He's not worth it," she murmured. "Don't give him what he wants." Cutter sneered and walked away. But Clara was right. Violence would only validate Cutter's portrayal of Elias as dangerous. The real victory would come through law and community unity. That night, the judge dined at Doc Finch's house, over roast chicken and honest conversation. She revealed more about her mission. "The territory is changing," she explained. "Statehood's coming. Maybe soon, but it won't happen if places like Dry Willow remain feudal kingdoms. Your irrigation project is about more than water. It's about civilizing the frontier." "Pretty words," Doc Finch said. "But Cutter won't give up easy. Men like him never do, but they're dinosaurs, fighting evolution." Judge Stone smiled at June. Who was helping serve? "It's her generation that matters now. What kind of world do we leave them?" June piped up. "One where water goes to everyone who needs it. Where being strong doesn't mean being mean. Where girls can be surveyors if they want." Clara laughed, delighted. "Hear, hear." "From your lips to God's ears, child." The judge agreed. She turned serious. "But building that world requires courage from all of us. Tomorrow, I'll issue preliminary rulings. Be ready for backlash." Elias walked Clara back to her temporary lodgings. She'd moved from Doc's to give the judge that room. The night was clear, stars brilliant in the desert sky. "Your daughter's amazing," Clara said. "So brave on that stand today." "Like her mother, like you." Clara stopped walking. "Elias, I need to say something. These weeks, working together, seeing your courage and kindness, I've come to care for you. And June, more than perhaps is wise given the circumstances." His heart hammered, but he kept his voice steady. "Circumstances change. When this is settled, when you're safe, I don't want to wait." She stepped closer. "Sarah's gone, and I'm sorry for your loss. But you're alive. Elias, June needs more than memories. Maybe you do too." She was right, he realized. Sarah would be the first to say it. Life was for living, not just enduring, but timing mattered. "When this is over," he promised, taking her hand. "When Cutter's defeated and the water flows fair, then we'll talk about the future, our future." Clara squeezed his hand. "I'll hold you to that, Mr. Boone." They parted at her door with hope between them. Fragile but real. Tomorrow would bring Judge Stone's rulings and Cutter's response. But tonight, they'd claimed something precious, the possibility of happiness after sorrow. Walking home under the stars, Elias felt Sarah's blessing like a warm wind. Life moved forward, carrying love and loss together. June deserved a full family. He deserved a second chance. And Clara, brave, brilliant Clara, deserved a partner who'd stand beside her always. The water would flow free, justice would prevail, and perhaps, in the flowing and prevailing, hearts would find their way to healing. Tomorrow's battles could wait. Tonight was for hope. The jail looked different at night. Shadows pooling in corners, lamplight barely reaching through barred windows. Elias crouched behind the feed store across the street, watching Sheriff Kincaid pace nervously inside. Clara had been arrested that afternoon on trumped-up charges of inciting civil unrest. Cutter's last desperate play before Judge Stone could issue her rulings. "The front door's too exposed," Ben Miller whispered beside him. "And Kincaid's got deputies posted. We're not breaking her out with guns." Elias replied, "This needs to be legal, or we prove Cutter right about us being lawbreakers." Doc Finch emerged from the shadows, Reverend Hale beside her. "It's done. I've got the writs." She waved official-looking papers. "Turns out Kincaid has a conflict of interest, receiving payments from Cutter. These documents temporarily suspend his authority pending investigation." "How'd you manage that?" "Judge Stone may be dining at the mayor's house, but her clerk likes my apple pie. Amazing what legal documents get left unattended during dessert." Doc's smile was sharp. "The suspension's real, just expedited." Reverend Hale shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure about this deception." "Would you rather leave Clara in there?" Doc challenged. "You saw those men Kincaid let in earlier. Cutter's lawyers, supposedly. You want her alone with them all night?" The Reverend subsided. They all knew what could happen to an unprotected woman in a lawless jail. "Here's the plan," Elias outlined. "Doc serves the papers, all legal and proper. Hale provides moral authority. Ben and I are just concerned citizens ensuring due process. No violence unless they force it." "And June," Doc asked. "Safe at your house with Mrs. Miller. She wanted to come, but she's already been brave enough this week." Doc finished. "Let's go get our surveyor." They crossed the street openly. No skulking that might suggest guilt. Doc knocked on the jail door with her medical bag, a familiar sight that wouldn't immediately alarm. "Sheriff, it's Doc Finch. One of your prisoners needs medical attention." Kincaid opened the door, suspicious but unable to refuse the town doctor. "No one's sick here." "I'll be the judge of that." Doc pushed past him, the others following. "Oh, and while I'm here, I have some papers for you." She thrust the documents at Kincaid, who read them with growing alarm. "This is impossible. You can't suspend a duly appointed sheriff." "A federal judge can," Reverend Hale said solemnly. "Render unto Caesar, sheriff, even you must obey the law." "This is a trick. Call Judge Stone if you doubt it," Ben suggested. "Course, interrupting her dinner might not improve your situation." Kincaid was trapped and knew it. The deputies, young men who'd taken the job for steady pay rather than loyalty to Cutter, backed away from the confrontation. "Where's Miss Hart?" Elias demanded. "Back cell," one deputy volunteered, eager to avoid trouble. "Mr. Cutter's lawyers are interviewing her." Elias moved before anyone could stop him. The back area held 3 cells, only one occupied. Clara sat rigid on a bench while Hank Cutter and another man loomed over her. Her face was calm, but Elias saw the white knuckles where she gripped her skirts. "Could all go away," Hank was saying. Just sign this paper saying the surveys were flawed. Admit you made mistakes. My brother's generous to those who see reason. And if I refuse, well, accidents happen in jail. You could fall, hurt yourself. Might be days before Doc Finch could tend you proper. Step away from her. Elias's voice cut like winter wind. Now. Both men spun. Hank's hand dropped to his gun, then stopped as he saw Elias already had his Colt drawn. You can't be here. Actually, I can. Sheriff's been suspended for corruption. These cells are under federal authority now. It was a stretch, but Hank didn't know that. Move aside. Doc Finch pushed past them all, medical bag in hand. Clara, dear, are you hurt? No, just ready to leave, if that's possible. More than possible. Legal and required. Doc helped Clara stand, shooting venomous looks at Hank. Touch her again and I'll forget my oath to do no harm. They formed a protective circle around Clara as they left. Kincaid protested, but didn't physically intervene. The deputies looked relieved. Only Hank followed them out, spitting threats. This changes nothing. You can't protect her forever. Don't need forever. Ben Miller replied, just until tomorrow when Judge Stone rules. Then it's you boys will need protecting. Outside, Clara maintained composure until they reached Doc's house. Only then did she allow herself to shake, accepting a cup of strong tea with trembling hands. They weren't going to let me leave, she said quietly. Not until I signed their papers. Or until... Don't think about it, Elias said firmly. You're safe now. Am I? She looked up at him. Cutter's desperate enough to falsify charges, to threaten me in jail. What happens when legal methods fail him completely? Before anyone could answer, June burst into the room. You're back. I knew Daddy would save you. We all saved her, Elias corrected. Working together, using the law. Just like Mama would have done, June said proudly. Then, to Clara. Were you scared? Terrified, Clara admitted. But being scared doesn't mean giving up. June nodded solemnly, then surprised everyone by climbing into Clara's lap, offering the comfort of a child's embrace. Clara held her tight, eyes meeting Elias's over June's head. Later, after June was asleep and plans were made for the morning's hearing, Elias walked Clara to her room. Doc's house was secure, but he checked windows anyway, old habits demanding vigilance. Thank you, Clara said, for coming for me, for caring enough to risk... Always, he interrupted. I'll always come for you. She stepped close, one hand on his chest. I know. That's what frightens me. What if next time... He silenced her with a kiss, gentle but sure. When they parted, her eyes were bright with tears. No what-ifs, he said. We face what comes as it comes. Together. Together, she agreed. Morning brought crowds to the town hall. Word of Clara's arrest and rescue had spread, turning public opinion firmly against Cutter. Judge Stone took her bench with grim authority, federal marshals flanking her. I've reviewed all evidence, she began without preamble. My findings are as follows. Sheriff Kincaid is hereby removed from office pending federal investigation of corruption. All charges against Miss Hart are dismissed as baseless. The water survey stands as valid and legal. The crowd stirred. Cutter's lawyer jumped up. Your Honor, we protest. Sit down, Mr. Pemberton. I'm not finished. Judge Stone's voice could have frozen flame. Furthermore, arrest warrants are issued for Hank Cutter and Roy Bell on charges of assault, attempted kidnapping, and witness intimidation. This is outrageous, Vernon Cutter roared. You have no authority. I have all the authority I need. The judge stood, imposing in her black robes. Mr. Cutter, you've run this town like a private kingdom for too long. That ends today. Federal oversight will continue until proper local authority is established. One of the marshals moved toward Hank, who looked ready to bolt, but his brother's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "We'll fight this in court," Vernon Cutter declared. "Real court, not this frontier puppet show." "That's your right," Judge Stone agreed. "In the meantime, your brother goes to federal custody. Unless you'd prefer to obstruct justice, I'm sure additional charges could be arranged." Defeated for now, Cutter stepped aside. Hank was cuffed and led away. Roy Bell having fled during the night, the courtroom erupted in amazed chatter. Through it all, Clara stood tall, vindicated. When Judge Stone called her forward to confirm the irrigation project's federal backing, she spoke with quiet strength about water and justice, community and progress. "The future of Dry Willow lies in cooperation, not control," she concluded. "Water belongs to all who need it." Spontaneous applause filled the hall. Even some of Cutter's ranch hands clapped, seeing opportunity in change. Vernon Cutter left without another word, Pemberton scurrying behind. That evening, the town celebrated. The Copper Star, scene of so much trouble, hosted a gathering that felt like hope. Clara sang for the first time since her arrival, not because men demanded it, but because joy demanded expression. Her voice, clear and true, filled the saloon with Shenandoah, while the crowd listened in reverent silence. Elias stood by the bar, June on his shoulders, watching Clara command the room through grace rather than fear. This was how it should be: strength without brutality, authority without oppression. "She's really staying," June whispered. "To help with the water project." "Looks like it." "Good. I think Mama sent her to us. Is that silly?" "No, little bird, not silly at all." Later, as the celebration wound down, Vernon Cutter made one last appearance. Not in person. He wasn't fool enough to face the crowd's mood. Instead, Pemberton delivered a message. Mr. Cutter wishes to announce his cooperation with the irrigation project." The lawyer read stiffly. "In the interest of progress and community harmony, Cutter Ranch will participate in the water-sharing agreement." Stunned silence greeted this reversal. Then Ben Miller laughed, meaning he knows he's beat and wants to salvage what he can. "Meaning water will flow free," Clara said simply. "That's what matters." The crowd dispersed into the night, spirits higher than they'd been in years. Elias walked Clara and June home, the three of them comfortable in shared silence. At Doc's gate, June ran ahead to give them a moment. "So what now?" Clara asked. "The survey's complete. The project's approved. I suppose I'll need to return to the commission. File reports." "Or," Elias suggested carefully, "you could stay, oversee the construction, make sure it's done right." "That could take months, years even." "I'm counting on it." She smiled, understanding his meaning. "Elias Boone, is that a proposal?" "It's a beginning," he said. "We've had enough endings lately. Time to build something new." "Yes," she said simply. "To the building, to the staying, to all of it. Yes." June appeared in the doorway, practically bouncing. "Did you ask her? Did she say yes? Are we going to be a family?" "Seems like it, little bird," Elias confirmed, his heart full. "Good." June launched herself at them both. "Mama would be so happy. I'm happy. We're all happy." And they were. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, they'd found their way through violence to peace, through fear to hope, through loss to love. The water would flow, the town would grow, and somewhere in the great turning of the world, Sarah smiled down on the family that had formed from fragments. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, under stars that had witnessed so much sorrow, joy finally had its say, and that, Elias thought as he held his daughter and the woman who'd become their future, was worth every dangerous step that had brought them here. The irrigation of Dry Willow would begin with the spring floods, but the irrigation of hearts withered by loss had already begun. and its harvest promised to be bountiful indeed. The town square had been transformed into an open-air courtroom, with rough planks forming benches and a raised platform serving as the judge's bench. The morning sun beat down mercilessly, but no one complained. This was justice under heaven's eye, and all of Dry Willow had come to witness it. Judge Abigail Stone presided with stern dignity, her black robes somehow maintaining their authority despite the frontier setting. Federal marshals flanked the platform, their presence a reminder that law had finally come to Dry Willow in full force. This tribunal is convened to address multiple charges of corruption, intimidation, and abuse of power. Judge Stone announced, "Let all who have grievances step forward." What followed was a careful orchestration of testimony. Clara presented her evidence first, ledgers showing water measurements, burned documents painstakingly recreated, maps demonstrating how the current system created artificial scarcity. She spoke with the precision of a scholar and the passion of a believer. "The data is irrefutable," she concluded. "Water resources have been deliberately manipulated to create dependency and control. This isn't about drought, it's about power." Doc Finch testified next, her medical records painting a damning picture. 17 cases of accidents among farmers who opposed Mr. Cutter, broken bones, burns, injuries consistent with intimidation rather than mishap. Reverend Hale, finding courage at last, revealed the web of debt that had silenced the town. "Vernon Cutter holds mortgages on half the businesses, including my church. We were afraid to speak because we feared losing everything." Fear is precisely what men like Cutter count on. Judge Stone observed, "The most dramatic moment came when a surprising witness took the stand, Maria Delgado, who had worked in the Cutter household for 15 years. "I have papers," she said quietly, producing a leather portfolio. "Mr. Cutter, he keeps records of everything. Who owes what, who can be pressured, who needs to be dealt with. I took these when I left his employ last week." Vernon Cutter shot to his feet. "Those are private documents, stolen property." "Sit down, Mr. Cutter." Judge Stone commanded, "Unless you'd like to explain why private documents detail plans for arson and assault." The documents were damning payments to enforce order, notes about handling troublesome farmers, even crude drawings of dam locations with notes about controlling water flow. Cutter's own meticulous record-keeping became his undoing. But the emotional heart of the trial came when June was called to testify. Elias wanted to object, but Clara touched his arm. "Let her speak," she whispered. "This is her town too." June climbed onto the witness chair, feet dangling above the floor. Judge Stone smiled kindly. "Now, June, you understand the importance of telling the truth." "Yes, ma'am. My mama taught me that truth is like water. It always finds its way." "Your mother sounds wise. Can you tell us what you've observed about the water situation in Dry Willow?" June straightened, finding her courage. "I've seen Mr. Miller's crops die while Mr. Cutter's stay green. I've seen families leave because they couldn't grow food. I've seen my daddy worry about having enough water for our horses." "And what changed when Miss Clara arrived?" "Hope came back," June said simply. "People started believing things could be different. That's why Mr. Cutter got so angry. He doesn't like hope unless he's selling it." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. Even Judge Stone's stern face softened. "One more question. June, do you think the irrigation project would help Dry Willow?" June considered seriously. "Water's like love. The more you share, the more there is. The project would share the water fare. That's all anyone wants. Isn't it fairness?" When Vernon Cutter took the stand in his own defense, his bluster had deflated. Pemberton tried to paint him as a successful businessman protecting legitimate interests, but the evidence was overwhelming. "You had Sheriff Kincaid in your pocket," Judge Stone stated. "You used economic pressure to silence opposition. You employed violence when other methods failed. How do you answer?" "I built this town," Cutter said. some of his old arrogance returning. When I arrived, this was nothing but dust and dreams. I made it prosperous. You made yourself prosperous, Clara interjected from her seat. The town survived despite you, not because of you. Miss Hart, please refrain from commentary, Judge Stone said mildly, though her eyes showed approval. The trial continued through the afternoon. More farmers testified about cut fences and poisoned wells. Business owners revealed the subtle threats that kept them in line. Even some of Cutter's own ranch hands granted immunity, described orders to discourage water surveyors. As the sun began its descent, Judge Stone called for closing arguments. Pemberton did his best, arguing that his client was merely a successful businessman in a hard land. But when Clara rose to speak for the community, her words carried the weight of truth. "This isn't about destroying Vernon Cutter," she said. "It's about building something better. The irrigation project offers prosperity for all, not just the powerful. We're asking for the chance to prove that cooperation beats coercion, that shared resources create more wealth than hoarded ones." She paused, finding Elias's eyes in the crowd. "Someone recently told me that water always finds its way, so does justice, if we're patient enough to dig the channels." Judge Stone retired to consider her verdict. The crowd milled restlessly, but there was no doubt about the outcome. When she returned, her face was grave but determined. "Vernon Cutter, I find you guilty of conspiracy, extortion, and using interstate commerce to facilitate criminal enterprise. You'll be remanded to federal custody pending formal sentencing." The crowd erupted. Cutter sat stunned as marshals approached with shackles. His empire, built on fear and control, crumbled in a single afternoon. Furthermore, Judge Stone continued when quiet returned. "All debts held by Mr. Cutter are subject to federal review. Illegally obtained advantages will be nullified. Sheriff Kincaid is permanently removed from office, banned from holding legal authority. New elections will be held within the month." She turned to Clara. "Miss Hart, the federal government fully endorses your irrigation proposal. Funding will be provided to begin construction immediately." Clara sagged with relief. Elias was beside her instantly, one arm supporting her while June hugged them both. "We did it," Clara whispered. "We actually did it." But the day's drama wasn't finished. As Cutter was led away, he turned to the crowd with something like understanding in his eyes. "You think you've won," he said quietly. "Maybe you have, but remember, I was just the first. As this territory grows, others will come. Men with smoother words and sharper lawyers. The fight for water never ends." "Then we'll be ready," Elias responded. "We've learned to stand together. That's not a lesson we'll forget." Cutter nodded slowly, then allowed himself to be led away. His reign was over, but his warning lingered. That evening, Dry Willow celebrated like it hadn't in years. The copper star flowed with beer and music. Clara sang again, this time joined by a chorus of townspeople. Joy was infectious, spreading through streets that had known too much fear. At sunset, a smaller gathering convened at the building site chosen for the first dam. Clara had her surveying equipment, but this was more ceremony than science. Representatives from every farm and business stood ready with shovels. "Before we begin," Reverend Hale said, "let us remember that we build not just for ourselves, but for our children and their children. May this water flow with justice and mercy for all who thirst." "Amen," the crowd murmured. Clara marked the first stake point. "Who should drive it?" Without hesitation, everyone turned to June. The little girl who'd asked, "Can we help her?" would place the first marker of change. June took the stake solemnly, chose her spot carefully, and drove it deep with a hammer almost as big as she was. The crack of wood on wood echoed across the valley like a bell of freedom. "I name this the Sarah Boone Reservoir," June announced, surprising everyone, especially her father. "Because my mama believed in helping others, and that's what this water will do." Elias's throat tightened. Clara squeezed his hand as tears ran freely down his face. Sarah would have been so proud of June, of all of them, of what they'd built from ashes and determination. One by one, others drove stakes, marking the future channel. Ben Miller for the farmers, Doc Finch for the townspeople, even Tom Harper, representing the merchants who'd finally found their courage. Each stake was a promise, a commitment to the common good. As darkness fell, torches were lit. The celebration moved back to town, but Elias, Clara, and June lingered at the site. The stakes stood like sentinels in the firelight, marking the beginning of transformation. "When will the water flow?" June asked. "By next spring," Clara promised. "When the mountain snow melts, we'll be ready to catch and channel it. Every farm will have what it needs. And no one can stop it, even with Mr. Cutter gone. Someone else might. They might try," Elias admitted. "But look what we did together. A town united is hard to defeat." June nodded, then yawned hugely. The day's excitement was catching up. Elias lifted her onto his shoulders for the walk back to town. "Clara," June said sleepily, "will you teach me surveying? I want to help measure things. Make sure they're fair." "I'd be honored," Clara replied. "We'll start tomorrow if you'd like." "Good. Mama always said I was good with numbers. Now I can use them to help people." By the time they reached Doc Finch's house, June was asleep on Elias's shoulders. They tucked her into bed, then stood together on the porch, processing the magnitude of the day. "Vernon Cutter was right about one thing," Clara said quietly. "This fight isn't over. Water rights will always be contested in dry lands." "Then we'll contest right back," Elias said. "We've got law on our side now, federal backing. Most importantly, we've got community will." "And each other," Clara added, stepping into his embrace. "Don't forget that part." "Never," he promised. Above them, stars wheeled in their eternal patterns, indifferent to human struggles. But below, in the town of Dry Willow, change flowed like water finding its course. The powerful had fallen. The meek had inherited, if not the earth, at least their fair share of water. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: construction logistics, funding details, the 1,000 complications of turning plans into reality. But tonight was for celebration, for rest, for gratitude that justice had finally found its way to their dusty corner of the world. The irrigation of Dry Willow would proceed, and with it, perhaps, the irrigation of the American West itself, not through force or fear, but through the radical notion that resources shared created more prosperity than resources hoarded. It was, as June had said, all about fairness. And finally, fairness had won the day. The spring dawn broke clear and bright over Dry Willow, painting the newly constructed dam in shades of gold and rose. What had been barren land 6 months ago now showed the promise of transformation. Channels carved through earth, gates ready to direct water, and the small reservoir beginning to fill with snowmelt from the distant mountains. Elias stood with June at the dam's edge, both wearing their Sunday best despite the early hour. Around them, the entire town had gathered for this moment, the official opening of the Sarah Boone Reservoir and the beginning of a new era for Dry Willow. "Look, Daddy." June pointed to where Clara stood with the other officials, her surveyor's notebook replaced by a ceremonial ribbon. "She's nervous." "She's got reason to be proud, not nervous," Elias replied. "This is her dream becoming real." "Our dream," June corrected. "Mama's dream, too." The crowd quieted as Reverend Hale stepped forward to offer a blessing. His words were simple but heartfelt, asking for wisdom in water's use and gratitude for its gift. When he finished, Mayor Coleman, newly elected after Pike's resignation, invited Clara to speak. "6 months ago," Clara began, her voice carrying clearly, I came to Dry Willow as a stranger with charts and numbers. I found a community thirsting not just for water, but for justice. Today, we celebrate both. She gestured to the dam, the channels, the waiting fields. This irrigation system is more than engineering. It's proof that cooperation conquers conflict, that shared resources multiply rather than diminish. Every stake driven, every shovel of earth moved, was an act of faith in our common future. The crowd murmured agreement. Elias saw Ben Miller nodding, his fields already prepared for the water that would soon flow. Doc Finch stood with the town council, her influence now officially recognized. Even Tom Harper had found redemption in honest support of the project. But most importantly, Clara continued, finding Elias and June in the crowd. This project proves that one voice asking, "Can we help?" can change everything. June Boone asked that question in a saloon one hot afternoon. Today, we answer with the flow of water to all who need it. June blushed as applause rippled through the gathering, but she stood tall, understanding the weight of the moment. Clara lifted the ceremonial scissors. I declare the Sarah Boone Reservoir and the Dry Willow Irrigation Project officially open. She cut the ribbon, and at her signal, Ben Miller and 3 other farmers cranked open the first gate. Water, precious and life-giving, began its journey through the carefully planned channels. The crowd erupted in cheers as the silver stream found its course, flowing toward fields that had known only dust. "It's working!" June exclaimed, jumping with excitement. "The water's really flowing." All along the channels, farmers opened smaller gates, directing water to their lands. The system Clara had designed worked perfectly, each farm receiving its calculated share. No more, no less. Fair distribution made real through engineering and community will. Vernon Cutter appeared at the crowd's edge, a shadow of his former self. Federal prison had aged him. Though he'd served only 6 months before, poor health earned him supervised release. He watched the water flow with something like understanding in his eyes. To everyone's surprise, he approached Elias. "Boone?" A word. Elias tensed, but Cutter's hands were empty. His posture deflated. "What do you want?" "To say you were right." The words seemed to pain him. "I spent so long controlling water, I forgot what it was for. Growing things, creating life." He looked at June. "Your daughter understood better than I did." "Pretty words," Elias said carefully. "But words don't undo harm." "No, but maybe actions can." Cutter produced a document. "I'm deeding my remaining water rights to the town trust. Let them be part of this new system. I've got no sons to inherit, and holding tight to what I've got seems foolish now." He handed the paper to Mayor Coleman and walked away without another word. The crowd parted silently, unsure how to react to this reversal. "People can change," Clara murmured. "Even the worst of us." "Maybe," Elias allowed. "Time will tell." The celebration continued through the morning. Tables were set up for a community feast. Children played in the irrigation channels, their laughter mixing with the sound of flowing water. Musicians struck up dancing tunes, and soon the square was full of whirling couples. Elias found himself watching Clara as she moved through the crowd, checking measurements, answering questions, accepting congratulations with grace. She'd stayed through the winter, overseeing construction, becoming as much a part of Dry Willow as the red rocks and endless sky. "You should ask her to dance," June suggested, appearing at his elbow with a plate of cake. "Should I now?" "Mama would want you to. She'd say life's for living, not just watching." Wisdom from a child, but true nonetheless. Elias crossed to where Clara stood discussing flow rates with Ben Miller. "Might I borrow our surveyor for a dance?" Clara's smile was radiant. "I thought you'd never ask." They joined the other couples as the fiddle played a waltz. Clara danced like she did everything else, with precision and passion combined. "I've been thinking," she said as they turned. "The Territorial Commission wants me to survey the Simpson Valley next, but But my work here isn't really finished. Someone needs to manage the irrigation system, ensure fair distribution, handle disputes. The town council's offered me the position of watermaster. Elias's heart leaped, but he kept his voice steady. And you're considering it? That depends. She met his eyes. On whether I have reasons to stay beyond the job. You have two very good reasons, Elias said. One's 9 years old and wants to learn surveying. The other's a bit older and wants to learn how to hope again. Those sound like excellent reasons. Clara's voice was soft. Perhaps we should make it official. Clara Hart, are you proposing to me in the middle of a public dance? Someone has to. You're too cautious by half. Elias Boone. He laughed, spinning her close. Then yes, to the proposal, to the staying, to all of it, yes. Around them, dancers noticed their joy and began applauding, though they couldn't know the cause. June appeared as if by magic, wrapping her arms around both of them. Does this mean Miss Clara's staying forever? Does this mean she'll be my mama too? If you'll have me, Clara said, kneeling to June's level. I already asked Mama in heaven. She said yes. June's certainty was absolute. She said you'd take good care of us, and we'd take good care of you. The wedding took place a month later, in the same square where justice had been served. The whole town attended, even Vernon Cutter, who sat quietly in the back. Clara wore her mother's dress, sent from Missouri. June served as flower girl, scattering petals with mathematical precision that made everyone smile. As Reverend Hale pronounced them married, water gurgled through the channels nearby, life flowing where death had threatened, hope running where despair had pooled. It was, everyone agreed, a perfect symbol for new beginnings. The reception featured Clara's singing, now a gift freely given rather than demanded. She and Elias danced to Shenandoah while June played the melody on her new harmonica, a wedding gift from Doc Finch. That evening, as the celebration wound down, the new family stood at the reservoir's edge. The setting sun turned the water to molten gold, and the first green shoots were visible in the irrigated fields. My mama would be so happy, June said, one hand in Elias's, the other in Clara's. She always said water finds its way. It found its way to the farms, and it found its way to us. Your mama was a wise woman, Clara said. I hope I can honor her memory. You already have, Elias assured her, by being yourself, by standing strong, by helping us remember how to hope. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the water flow. Somewhere in the gathering dusk, a bird sang, maybe a meadowlark, maybe something rarer. The sound carried across the transformed valley like a blessing. Daddy? June asked as they turned toward home. Can we help her build the future? Elias smiled at the echo of that first question, the one that had started everything. Yes, little bird, we can help build the future, starting today. Clara squeezed both their hands. We already have. Every channel dug, every gate opened, every choice to stand together instead of apart. The future isn't somewhere we're going, it's something we're creating. As they walked home through streets no longer dusty but lined with young trees, past fields no longer brown but showing green promise, the truth of her words settled like peace in their hearts. They had fought for water and won so much more: community, justice, love, and the chance to build something lasting. The story of Dry Willow's transformation would be told for generations. How a town chose courage over fear. How a child's question changed everything. How water, like love, multiplied when shared. But for now, it was enough to walk home together. A family forged from loss but defined by hope, as water sang its ancient song through channels carved by human hands and hearts united in common purpose. The irrigation of Dry Willow was complete, the irrigation of souls. That deeper work would continue as long as water flowed and love endured, which in a place where both ran true and deep would be forever. Thank you so much for listening to this story of courage, love, and justice in the Old West. I hope Clara, Elias, and little June's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Please share in the comments where you're listening from. I love connecting with fellow Western story enthusiasts from around the world. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like. And don't forget to hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of the American frontier. Your support means the world to me and helps keep these tales of the Old West alive. Until next time, partners.